There is a grass blend that fixes its own fertilizer from the atmosphere, self-limits at height to 4 to 6 inches, and eliminates the need for a lawnmower entirely. It requires no synthetic nitrogen, no herbicides, no weekly maintenance schedule, and no subscription to a seasonal chemical program. It was the American standard for half a century. And in a single advertising campaign launched in 1955, the lawn care industry reclassified it as a weed and erased it from the cultural memory of an entire nation. Right now, hundreds of American municipalities have written HOA codes that explicitly prohibit this plant on your own property. So what is it? How does it actually work? And more importantly, how do you get it back? Let's find out. To understand why this technology is a direct threat to a $60 billion industry, you have to understand the problem it was designed to solve. The American lawn was not always the chemical monoculture it is today. For the first half of the 20th century, the standard residential lawn was not a single species of grass. It was a blend. And woven into that blend, at a ratio of roughly 20%, was a plant that had been regarded as a horticultural asset for generations: clover. Clover's relationship with nitrogen goes back not decades but millennia. It belongs to the legume family, a class of plants that evolved a symbiotic relationship with a specific genus of soil bacteria called Rhizobium. These bacteria colonize the root system of the clover plant and perform a biological process called nitrogen fixation, pulling inert atmospheric nitrogen gas directly out of the air and converting it into ammonium, a form of nitrogen that plants can actually absorb and use for growth. The clover feeds the bacteria a steady supply of sugars produced through photosynthesis. The bacteria, in return, manufacture the fertilizer the lawn needs to stay dense and green. This is not a metaphor. It is a measurable, documented biological process. A well-established microclover blend fixes between 100 and 200 pounds of nitrogen per acre per year. A conventional Kentucky bluegrass monoculture, by contrast, requires between 200 and 250 pounds of synthetic nitrogen per acre per year just to maintain the same density and color. The clover lawn is running a nitrogen engine that is already built into the soil. The conventional lawn is running on an external fuel supply that has to be purchased, delivered, and applied 4 to 6 times per growing season. But nitrogen fixation is only one part of what makes this system remarkable. The variety engineered specifically for residential lawns is called microclover, a dwarf cultivar of white clover bread, for fine leaf texture and low growing habit. Unlike standard clover, which can send flower stalks up to 12 inches high, microclover self-limits its vegetative growth at 4 to 6 inches. It does not keep growing and requiring a cut to remain presentable. It reaches its natural canopy height and stops. In a blended lawn at 20% coverage, this means the grass species in the mix, whether that is fescue, ryegrass, or bluegrass, is continuously fertilized and the overall canopy never exceeds a height that requires weekly mowing. Many users on established microclover blend lawns report cutting frequency dropping from once a week during the growing season to once every 3 to 5 weeks. There are no moving parts, no chemical inputs, no service contracts, no fuel. And here is the part the lawn industry does not want you doing the math on. The average American household spends between $600 and $1,200 per year on lawn care inputs, fertilizer, herbicides, and mowing fuel. A lawn mower itself costs between $300 and $1,500, depreciates across a 7 to 10-year lifespan, and requires annual servicing. Add a professional lawn care program from a national provider, and that number climbs past $3,000 annually. A microclover blend seed costs between $40 and $90 for 5,000 square feet. You spread it once. The biology does the rest. But here's what most people don't realize. This wasn't a fringe idea or a counterculture experiment. It was the mainstream. Before 1955, clover was not only accepted in American residential lawns, it was actively included in commercial grass seed mixes sold by the very same companies that later worked to eliminate it. The USDA Extension Services recommended it. Horticultural handbooks praised it. Lawn seed bags marketed it as a selling point. The nitrogen-fixing properties of clover were understood, valued, and deliberately incorporated into turf management. For 50 years, the American lawn coexisted with clover as standard practice. Then Scotts introduced Turf Builder. Turf Builder was a broadleaf herbicide and fertilizer combination product. It was a genuinely effective product at killing dandelions, plantain, and other broadleaf species that homeowners didn't want in their lawns. But it had one significant problem. It also killed clover. Clover is a broadleaf plant. There was no formulation that would selectively remove dandelions while preserving clover because they occupy the same botanical category. Scotts faced a choice: reformulate the product or reframe the problem. They chose the latter. The company's marketing materials in the late 1950s and early 1960s began classifying clover as a weed. Not because it performed poorly, not because it caused lawn problems, but because its presence made the herbicide less marketable. If clover was desirable, Turf Builder was a liability. If clover was a weed, Turf Builder was the solution. Through trade publication advertising, retailer partnerships, and the emerging reach of television, that reclassification spread through the American consciousness within a single decade. By the mid-1960s, an entire generation of homeowners had been conditioned to view the same plant their parents had deliberately seeded as a sign of a neglected lawn. This was not an accident. It was a business decision that reshaped 50 years of American horticultural knowledge in a single advertising cycle. And the industry that built itself on that reframing has since constructed a regulatory architecture designed to lock it in permanently. HOA covenants across hundreds of American municipalities now explicitly list clover as a prohibited species under uniformity standards. These standards were written entirely around the aesthetic of the chemical monoculture lawn, a single species, uniform blade width, a consistent cut height maintained by weekly mechanical mowing. Clover, because it produces a different leaf shape and occasional white flowers, fails that standard by definition. It is not banned because it performs poorly. It is banned because it performs differently, and the standard was never written to accommodate it. In some municipalities, a homeowner who overseeds their lawn with a microclover blend can receive a formal notice of violation from their HOA before the seed even germinates. The regulatory text refers to noxious or invasive plant species, language, that was retrofitted onto clover decades after it had been a deliberate and valued component of those same lawns. The lawn chemical industry has also invested heavily in maintaining the monoculture model at the retail level. Walk into any national home improvement store today. The seed section will offer fescue, bluegrass, ryegrass, and a dozen branded grass monocultures, each paired with its own companion fertilizer, herbicide, and pre-emergent program. Microclover blends are absent from the shelf. They have to be sourced online, from specialty seed suppliers, or from European agricultural catalogues, where clover has never been demonized and remains a standard component of turf management to this day. In the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and Germany, microclover blend lawns are commercially available at mainstream garden centers. The European horticultural consensus never adopted the American reclassification, the plant that was defined as a weed by a marketing campaign. In the United States is still sold as a lawn improvement product across the Atlantic. So what does implementation actually look like? And how do you get this system working in your lawn today? The most effective approach for an established lawn is overseeding rather than complete renovation. You do not need to kill your existing grass. In early spring or early fall, when soil temperatures sit between 50 and 65 degrees Fahrenheit, you mow your existing lawn short, to thatch the surface using a stiff rake or mechanical dom, and broadcast microclover seed across the entire area at a rate of roughly a quarter pound per 1,000 square feet. The small seed size means it will work its way into soil contact without burial. A light top dressing of compost will accelerate germination. The target establishment ratio is 15 to 20% clover coverage by surface area. Below that threshold, the nitrogen contribution is insufficient to feed the surrounding grass. Above 30%, the clover begins to compete with the grass for light during midsummer. At 20%, you reach what agronomists call a mutualistic balance. The clover feeds the grass. The grass shades the clover roots and prevents moisture loss, and the system becomes largely self-sustaining. In the first growing season after overseeding, you will likely still need to apply a light nitrogen supplement once, in early spring to support establishment. By the second season, the rhizobium colonies in the root zone will be sufficiently established to carry the system without external fertilizer input. There are a few specific management notes that matter here. First, do not apply any broadleaf herbicide to a microclover blend lawn. That is not a technicality. That will kill the clover and return you to a conventional monoculture within a single spray application. Spot treat problem weeds manually or with a targeted organic acid product. Second, the clover will produce small white flowers during peak growing season. These attract pollinators. If that is a concern for foot traffic areas, a mow at the 4-inch threshold will remove the flowers without damaging the plant. Third, in prolonged drought, clover will go dormant before grass does. The lawn may show patches of browning during extreme heat. It will recover faster than grass once moisture returns, because the deep root system is more drought resistant than most turfgrass species. For homeowners operating under HOA restrictions, the path forward requires a slightly different approach. 12 states currently have right-to-garden or pesticide restriction laws that create legal tension with HOA authority over lawn composition. Florida, for example, has statutes that limit HOA authority to restrict plants that are not formally listed as invasive or noxious species under state law. Clover does not appear on Florida's invasive species list. Several other states, including Maryland, Connecticut, and Vermont, have moved to restrict HOA authority over pesticide use and low-impact lawn management, creating openings that did not exist 5 years ago. Document your lawn's performance. Photograph it. Record your maintenance inputs and costs. If your HOA issues a violation notice, request the specific regulatory citation in writing. In many cases, HOA enforcement of broadleaf plant prohibitions has not kept pace with recent legislative changes, and an informed homeowner who has done the research can successfully contest a violation without legal representation. The microclover lawn is not a compromise. It is a technically superior system. It fixes its own nitrogen. It self-limits its height. It outcompetes many common weeds by shading the soil surface. It supports pollinators. It reduces maintenance costs by 60% or more over the life of the lawn. And it was the American standard for 50 years before a single herbicide product needed a marketing strategy. That required a plant to become a weed. A lot of what this channel covers was not abandoned because it stopped working. It was abandoned because it stopped being profitable for the people selling the alternative. If recovering that knowledge matters to you, subscribing and sharing is the simplest way to make sure it keeps being found.